digestion. So say we pick pizza, slice of pizza, and we're not chewing it and we just swallow it and it goes into the stomach. It can actually make us feel dizzy, foggy in the brain, because it can't actually break down. The food can sit there for a long period of time. It should be sitting there between 4 hours, but it will stay there for 12 hours. You'll wake up in the morning and you'll still feel full in the stomach because it's still sitting there. So the body needs more water than food, but we're not there yet. So it's all about just filling up. So the food sits there, it ferments, and when it ferments, it turns into, there's 3 things that can be blocking. One is inflammation, the other is the debris of the whole foods, and then it starts to have a chemical response. So it starts to ferment. When food ferments, it builds up the bad bacteria.
Wow.
So chemically, that's what's happening. You're actually increasing bad bacteria. So it's not a favorable environment anymore, and the microbiome is suppressed. Because when you're full in the stomach and small intestine, you're not happy. So something has to give, and you really need to take a break on the digestive system. So it allows for everything to migrate down and out of the body. And diluting it with lots of water is the way to go. So more water, less food.
The place that I wanted to start with this conversation is, what is digestion and how does it influence mental and emotional well-being?
Okay, so well, I would say that digestion begins with not only the choice of food, but how we eat the food. So if we're not chewing properly, if we're on the go and just eating quickly and, not enough time, then the body's in stress when we're eating. So we need to take our time, chew our food properly, because you have enzymes being released. The first enzyme is amylase, which is in the mouth, and that is where carbohydrates are digested. So you can imagine just, biting into a sandwich and not chewing properly and just swallowing. And then as soon as it hits the stomach, it's all over. So you have an interruption of enzymes coming in, going, how am I going to break down this food? There's a combination of carbohydrates, proteins, and good foods in there. So it becomes disrupted. If we swallow the food and don't chew it properly, then how are we going to get our nutrients within that food? So once we look at undigested food, that's when it causes stress. So the body says, okay, you still haven't fed me. So then it says, okay, if you're not going to give me protein, just give me some fat. So that's where people reach out for sugars and just something quick to fill them up. But we all know if the body's not nourished, it will just keep asking for more and more and more. So that's why you hear that concept of, I had a salad. How can that fill me up? But if I have a sandwich, it's not going to fill me up. It'll only be for a short period of time. But then it spikes the insulin. It doesn't stabilize it. And so then you just keep eating all day, not being fulfilled.
And
so the mood becomes eradicated. So, so around about that 3 or 4 o'clock mark in the afternoon, if the insulin hasn't stabilized, it will just keep saying, okay, give me some chocolate. Give me something that's going to fill the void, because that's the time that the kidney energy starts to activate. So it's looking for that stabilization, but we're going for the wrong foods. But it all begins with the mouth. It all begins with chewing for the body to get nutrient.
So I guess a bit of context for individuals listening around digestion. You spoke about there about, not properly chewing foods, and I want to touch on that as well because I've had my own journey with that and still do to this day around habits of chewing. But in the context of digestion, can you run people through how the digestion system works? Just a brief overview so we can fit this into the context of the conversation.
Yeah, in a simple form, we eat the food, we're chewing it, it becomes like a bulbous liquid. In there, there's an enzyme, amylase. It goes down the esophagus, hits the stomach. Once it hits the stomach, then you've got a high dose of hydrochloric acid in there to break down protein. So hydrochloric acid is a good bacterial killer as well. So anything that's foreign, or we've got food poisoning or something doesn't feel right, you need a high dose of hydrochloric acid in the stomach to be able to break down foods properly. Then as soon as it hits the top of the small intestine, the duodenum, then you've got other enzymes coming in to help the process even more break down to smaller molecules. So then as soon as it hits the ileum, the end of the 22 feet of small intestine, that's where we get our absorption of vitamins and minerals before it hits the bowel. So there's no absorption or breaking down within the gut, within the bowel, large intestine. So it's only there to contract and move the debris of food along to the exit point.
And so,
sorry to interrupt, but so when the process of the food entering into the small intestine, you also have, as it's being broken down into small molecules, it goes into other organ systems. So you've got the pancreas having to break down more of the sugars and the carbs and releasing the amount of insulin that it needs. And then you've got the liver also, that manufactures hormones. So each organ system relies on that bit of food that's entering from your mouth into the small, distributing into the bloodstream, into the liver, the pancreas, and then going all the way down. Also the kidneys needs nourishment as well before it hits that exit point of the large intestine.
And so throughout that journey, like there's so many parts in where, this can go right and it can go wrong. And I guess we can start with chewing, right? And I'll share a bit about my journey. So I was with a friend who is in a similar field as you in the health space and helping clients to move through health issues. And I was sitting with him and eating, and he sat down and he would pick up a mouthful. He would chew it for about, not even kidding, 45 seconds to a minute, and then put the fork down, look around, pick the fork back up and start chewing again. And then he was on probably his fifth or sixth biteful, and I was finished the meal, right? I've always been a very fast eater. And so he looked at me, he goes, I'm explaining to all these health issues I have, like after I eat, I feel dizzy. After I eat, I feel fatigued. I feel tired. I feel exhausted. Sometimes I hallucinate. Like all these strange things would happen. I'm not even kidding. Hallucinations would happen sometimes. So he said, just practice for one meal. Just sit with me one meal. Whether it's next week or whatever. Sit with me for one meal. We're gonna eat really slow. So next week we meet up and we go to Grilled, and we get these salad bowl with this food in it. Obviously there's food in it. That's what we eat. But there's a salad bowl, and we sat together, and I just followed his pace. And it was the strangest thing, right? And I was sitting there, and usually after I eat, I'm expecting that feeling to come along. And it's almost like I felt inside my body after I'd eaten this meal for like 35 minutes. It was cold by the end, but I was eating for about 35 minutes. After I felt the response coming on, but it wouldn't come. It would kind of drift back and it would come and drift back. And he was explaining to me that when we, and this is just me paraphrasing here, I haven't spoken about this in a
Yeah.
long time, but correct me if I'm wrong here. But he was saying to me that when we don't chew foods, um, and it goes into our stomach, it essentially it will sit on the side of the stomach lining, and because it's not properly chewed up, those enzymes would almost not rot away, but my wording would be rot away the gut lining, which then can lead to things like leaky gut. It can lead to IBS, and various health issues that we use so broadly these days. So I guess for those listening, and feel free to correct my explanation there because I know it's very general, but what is the effects of not chewing and what does that look like?
Mm. Well, it's a stress response. If you don't chew when you're swallowing, it'll stay in the stomach too long, and that's what was happening in your situation. So we can't, it needs to be mush. And, you know, if you blend food into a blender, that should be your stomach content. It should look like that, which no one does, you know, because we're not mindful, we don't take our time. And everyone's on social media and looking at their screens these days. They're not used to sitting with someone, having a conversation, because when you talk, you're actually eating slower. So you've really got to be mindful that you can't. If you have that food and it enters into the small intestine and we have a stress response, the body will build up what looks like mucus, inflammation. It's called biofilm. And so, what your friend was talking about is if you've got undigested food in there, the size of your fist is the size of your stomach. Now, remember what we were talking about before. If you don't nourish the organ systems and the cells, and you know there's not this fulfillment, the body will say, I'm not fed, just keep feeding me. And so what happens with the stomach, it starts to stretch. And when there's this stretching happening, then we're consuming a lot more food. Now it only takes 3 days to shrink the stomach. So that means if you can't get used to chewing, then go on to smoothies, go on to vegetable juicing just to nourish your body. And within 3 days, there's no way you'll be able to eat that burger and fries. The stomach would feel quite full very quickly.
And so, just the science behind how it works, like run us through
Mm.
what happens when someone doesn't chew. You can use a food as an example if you like, but let's say I'm
Okay.
eating right now and I just take a massive bite, I swallow it whole. What happens in the stomach and what happens in the colon?
Yeah. Well, it all depends to the enzyme production. So say we pick pizza, slice of pizza, and we're not chewing it and we just swallow it and it goes into the stomach. It can actually make us feel dizzy, foggy in the brain, because it can't actually break down. So you're waiting between 12, the food can sit there for a long period of time. It should be sitting there between 4 hours, but it will stay there for 12 hours. You'll wake up in the morning and you'll still feel full in the stomach because it's still sitting there. So what people do, they're under this impression of when I eat, I'll be pushing the food down and having a bowel motion. It doesn't work that way. It's still in the system. So while it's in there, it starts to ferment, because also if we're consuming a lot of food, you can bet that the person's not drinking enough water. It just happens. So the body needs more water than food, but we're not there yet. So it's all about just filling up, filling up. So the food sits there, it ferments, and when it ferments, it turns into there's 3 things that can be blocking. One is inflammation, The other is the debris of the whole foods. And then it starts to have a chemical response. So it starts to ferment. When food ferments, it builds up the bad bacteria. And when the bad negative bacterium starts to grow, it's called candida, which is influenced by sugars and yeast. So in that slice of pizza, it converts into sugar, and there's yeast in there, and there's gluten and all these products that the body can't assimilate and break down, so it gets stored. So as we're building up the bad bacteria, which should be at 30%, we tend to increase it at 70%. Now, if it's long-term at 70%, it will start to eat away at the gut wall. Now, we're not talking colon at this stage, we're talking small intestine, where our immune system is, the villi that does all the absorption distribution of nutrients, that starts to wear down, and the gut wall starts to leach candida bacteria into the bloodstream. At this stage, it's called systemic candida. It's in the blood. And you can see it under a microscope with live blood analysis. You can see if the candida is in the bloodstream. Now, if it hasn't entered the bloodstream, you will feel quite full, quite tired, foggy in the head, definitely. So the system does need a break at this stage to move the food down.
Wow.
So chemically, that's what's happening. You're actually increasing bad bacteria. So it's not a favorable environment anymore, and the microbiome is suppressed. Because when you're full in the stomach and small intestine, you're not happy. And don't forget, this actually migrates down to the bowel, to the colon, and that's where you have the suppression of neurotransmitters. So something has to give, and you really need to take a break on the digestive system so it allows for everything to migrate down and out of the body. And diluting it with lots of water is the way to go. So more water, less food.
Wow. And so if we're eating at a meal, right? And let's just give breakfast an example. What is the recommended, let's say worst case scenario, but better than what most people are doing. How should people be chewing? Should it be without a TV? I guess just if someone has a habit of watching stuff on YouTube or on TV or, on technology while they're eating, what's something they can begin with? And maybe what's the ideal when it comes to chewing?
Yeah, so the stomach gets to function well between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., not after that. So we should be having breakfast at that time. So I would say start with some liquid, not straight off some food. So if you had, for example, you'd like to get the bowel moving, get the liver moving first thing in the morning, then you would have, say, some hot water and lemon first thing. So drink that slowly. It'd be best not to be watching TV, definitely no social media while digestion is working, because it needs to be stress-free. And anything we take in visually is corrupted. so the body needs to be calm when you're eating. So I'd say sit outside, and you might want to just be drinking your hot water and lemon. And already the system's starting to calm down, and then you can start to eat a piece of fruit, and then see how you feel after that. So it could be a green apple, could be a banana, and just take your time and see how you feel. You might feel really full after the banana and then think, you know what, I don't need to overload right now. I can just wait till I get into work and then maybe grab something then.
And is there a rule of thumb for chewing? So if someone's having a meal and they're chewing, is there a rule of
So if
thumb
you had
like
some muesli, yeah, if you had
you know,
some muesli
could be
with
any
some
food?
yogurt, yeah, just really take your time and chew. Don't, if you're starting work at 9 o'clock, don't be having your breakfast at 8:30 because you'll just be, wolfing it down.
And is there like I'm looking for a number of like, 20 chews, 30 chews, or is it up to the person and their intuition?
uh, the more digestible the food is, the less chewing. So, people love their smoothies first thing in the morning. So you could already have a drink that's pre-digested by putting it into the blender. And yeah, you can drink that quickly. But if you were having bacon and eggs for breakfast, you really need to chew properly. And only one egg, not two eggs at a time.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Okay then. And so I guess moving on to emotions and how they correlate with the digestive system, can we run through some emotions? And feel free to start with whatever emotion you see fit and how they correlate with specific areas of the body.
Sure. Well, look, my journey started with going into colon hydrotherapy, and that's where I saw the mapping of the organ systems within the colon. So there was a doctor called Dr. Norman Walker that actually mapped the organ systems within the colon. So over the years of working with colon hydrotherapy, I went off and did kinesiology and found with all organ systems there was an emotion linked to it. So that's where, with also cardiologists finding that 95% of neurotransmitters were in the transverse colon. So the mapping of the emotions with the organ systems, we found that where the neurotransmitters were in the transverse colon, and funny enough, most fecal matter is in the transverse and the descending colon. In the ascending tends to be all these undigested foods and inflammation and the biofilm, which makes a favorable environment for its favorable environment for parasites is where the cecum is, just above the appendix. So where the emotion lies, say let's stick to the neurotransmitters, and you have fecal matter trapped in there through undigested food. Now we've got the fecal plaque trapping on the wall of the bowel, on the mucus lining, that will suppress the serotonin and the dopamine from being released. Now, what happens with the mood? The mood at that stage, you're going through suppression. I like to call it suppression and depression than depression. So you've got depression, you've got anxiety. But when you look at the organ system, the reflex points are lungs, bronchioles. So those emotions are linked to grief, sadness, and suppression. So I was excited to do the first in the world of mapping out the emotions back in 2019. And it's really funny that we're talking today because I just saw a movie last night and it was called No One Wants This, and it was Christine Bell, and the mother of the show, she turns around and says, do you know sadness is in your colon? And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's me. That's my child. So it was fantastic to get that confirmation that the people are listening. Yeah. So that's how we found the mapping of the emotions. So, through doing kinesiology now, you can actually source through the unconscious mind which emotion is actually trapped in the gut. So that's how we found it, through the undigested food causing the stress response, lodging in the colon. We were actually able to see which emotion was being suppressed. But look, it's not a real emotion. It's only triggering the emotion because of the undigested food. It's amazing what we do to our bodies. And it's not even real. So as soon as the emotion shifts and you've got the debris of the undigested food moving through, you forget what you were grieving about. You forget what you were sad about. And it's not real. And fear is the biggest negative emotion. Whenever we're in fear, it escalates to anger. Yeah? So fear comes first. And it's that 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon when we want that sugar hit. Yeah, we're feeling tired. When we're tired, it makes us feel unfulfilled. It's all of these things that come into it. Or late at night, after dinner. Even if, it's funny, I have clients saying, oh, but it's only dark chocolate. So they think that dark chocolate's good for them. But it's still sugar. It's still sugar and fat. So the body is clever how it wants to keep suppressing the emotion, because remember, the bad bacteria is at 70%. It just wants you to keep eating things to keep the bad bacteria thriving. So the body's very clever like that.
There's an interesting book that I read some time ago called Supergut by Dr. William Davis, and he was also on this podcast as well. And in this book, we spoke about this in the podcast as well, but certain bacteria like Lactobacillus rhodori and Bifidobacterium infidus is one of them, and a whole other host of other bacterias. And we were talking about how these bacterias, when it's plentiful in our bodies, we can tend to be more compassionate, more caring, thicker skin, not emotionally, but literally, thicker hair, things like that. And it just opened my mind up to some of and they found this strand in hunter-gatherer tribes, and in modern humans. By modern humans, I mean westernized, civilized, at least in our estimation, what that means. Humans who had don't have this in their stomach. At least 96% of them, or something around that, don't have in their stomach, and that just having this in there can make all the difference. So with this, the solution for the bacteria is to just put the bacteria in the stomach, and there's other issues like integration and things like that. But with this, we've got this stuff trapped in our colon or in our digestive system. What is the solution to, I guess, beginning to heal? Obviously, there's seeing someone like yourself, but I guess just for those at home who want to start taking action straight away, they want to start chewing more often. What are some other solutions that people can take?
Do you know, Luke, what he was actually talking about was, these people that had the beneficial bacteria in their gut had no inflammation because they weren't subjected to foods that actually cause a stress response within the gut. So I would say the first thing you do is lower the inflammation. And then you're able to absorb nutrients. Then your bacteria can start to balance out and have that positive microbiome being produced. So get down the inflammation. The first thing to do is introduce water, because water is the quickest way to dilute the biofilm, the inflammation that prevents you from absorbing nutrients. When your inflammation's high, your head is foggy. You can't think straight. you've got no energy. It all has to do with inflammation. Now, the biofilm within the gut, now it will start to increase. Now, when it increases, inflammation or this biofilm leads to other diseases within the body. So you're not looking at digestive dysfunction then. Then you're looking at other chronic diseases. So formation, during the conception, that the genoembryonic stage is the first 3 weeks is the development of the gut. So that's where you have the different sections within the layers of the gut being formed. It's only 5 to 7 weeks later you have the brain. With the brain stem, then it separates into the 3 quadrants of the brain. Yeah, so it's quite incredible that you just go, it starts with the gut, ends with the gut. So every kind of disease, repair the gut, and then you'll have that eradication of disease going back into your own homeostasis of how you should be. So what the doctor was talking about was an environment that's not stressful. So, and do you know we're born with the blueprint to heal? So the body knows exactly what to do. It will start to repair itself. It doesn't need intervention like medications, things like that. So the minute you start to clear the inflammation, everything starts to repair. And that means getting onto more water, having alkaline foods. So start off with the first 6 weeks of having lots of green vegetables. Get into your smoothies. Have pre-digestive foods like even thick soups that are very nourishing. At this stage, you're having the digestive system not work hard. It's just going straight into nutrient distribution. So then everything starts to repair. 6 weeks, you're looking at refining the diet, having more liquids, less food.
And I suppose the missing element to this, at least from my side, is when it comes to stress and emotional stress. I guess the question I have around that is, take someone who, eats what I would call the average diet in the Western world. And by average, I don't mean it's a positive thing. I mean average as in they wake up and they have cereal,
Yeah.
they have sandwiches, things like that. And whether or not you think that's a bad thing, it's another question. But the question is, let's say someone has that diet, but they're very calm, they look after their emotional health, they're grounded, they eat slowly, they don't use their phone, they chew, they do all these things. Would that person have many issues with food? I mean, obviously it's case by case, but is your estimation that the habits around food, the emotional health that we have around food and around our lives, is that more important than the substance of the food?
Yeah, yes, it is. So when we're looking at when a child's born, between its birth to the age of 7, that's where most of the patterns step in from their conscious state of what they take in and what they're learning. So then it's the reward of what are you rewarding your body with? If you've got emotion coming up, I would say don't eat. Just start to drink water if you're upset. So it's all that programming. Did the mother give a lolly to the child that was crying? Sadness. If it was upset. Yeah? So it's that we shouldn't be rewarded when we're emotional. We should sit with the emotion and say, why are we emotional? We're taking it personally. It's never personal. It's just a lesson. But if we get into a habit of having the piece of chocolate or the bread or something to suppress the emotion because we want that inflammation to suppress it, shove it right down, then we will go for what's suppressing the emotion, like bread, pasta, white rice, and so forth. But if you have a healthy state of mind and they want to have a ham and cheese croissant in the morning, for example, then you have to just be drinking lots of water to know that you need to move it from the stomach all the way down before you fill up again. So you can't be having that kind of breakfast and then going into a pasta for lunch. It will create a stress response. Whether you like it or not, it will trigger fear. It will trigger anger, you know? So whether you like it or not, you are sabotaging the whole system. And you will have a reaction because remember, food has a chemical response. You can't get away with it. Unless you just want to have a cheat meal and just stick to that once a day and nothing else, but you're going to be drinking 4 liters of water to dilute that meal. So to answer your question, can we have these meals and be happy? I would say either you've got the conscious mind completely separated from the body, which happens, and they just keep shoveling in because they don't want to feel. And also on a chemical response, the bad bacteria is at a high percentage, keeps craving those same foods. Now, it would be good to ask someone who has got that kind of diet, what do they tend to think about every day? Remember, it's that repetitive thought that we have at 73% a day. What is their repetitive thinking? How do they like their job? What's their home life like? Why do they keep suppressing? There's so many factors in there.
And so we've spoken about the habit of a child getting a lollipop when they're sad and that emotional anchor. Let's speak about the opposite and how, well, I mean, maybe not the opposite in all ways, but in the context of this, how does diet and specific foods help to suppress or express certain emotions? Is that even a thing, or what's the nature of that?
Yeah, so the more inflammation that we have in the body, the more that we will be drawn to foods. Also, dehydration causes inflammation. So it could start off with dehydration, then it goes to being attracted to these inflammatory foods. We're never happy. So notice when you are feeling happy, you go for bright coloured foods. Then when you're feeling sad, you go for the stodgy foods. And isn't it funny that we go, oh yeah, the stodgy foods actually make us happy when we look at that. But it's a programming that we've had along the way. But a bright coloured salad with some protein in it, if we get drawn to that, we're in a happy state. So that will not suppress any emotion. But when we're unhappy, can you think of eating something healthy? No. It's very hard. It's very hard if we're emotional and we've had a hard day, and someone's triggered us. It's always good to feel, what kind of emotion have I been triggered with today? And see then what your brain is going to. It might want to go through and drive through and get some Macca's or Kentucky Fried, right? That stage, we're being emotional. We're tired, we're frustrated, we're unfulfilled, and we just want to go home and sleep.
So what do we do in those situations? How do we, when we are having those hard
Drink
days?
water.
Okay.
So don't eat. Just drink some water until you go home. So keep sipping and sipping and sipping. By the time you get home, just a 600 ml bottle, and you're sipping it on the train or in the car. By the time you go home, you've changed. It's like, oh, I'm really not that hungry. Yeah. And you can make a wise decision then to crack open, a can of tuna, cook up some, brown rice or whatever's in the fridge, of, you know, a salad or something you've prepared.
Well, I think also
It
as
looks
well, when
good.
someone is in that state, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, not denying yourself the
Yeah.
thing that you think you want, but rather letting yourself have it, but just create a bit of boundary around it. So an example might be, oh, I'm really craving like some chocolate and I really want to go home and have chocolate. It's like you can, but just first to give it an hour or two and then do it. Don't do it impulsively. Give yourself an hour or two, have some water. And if you feel like it, then no problems at all.
Perfect.
How's that frame? Is that
That's right. And don't forget, no guilt when you have it. If you feel like it, have it, but there's no guilt around it. But start off by having some water first. Just a shift if there is a negative emotion that's been brought up during work, and it's not real. It's only a short amount of time, but it's really anchored in there because we're already inflamed, already full. So it's triggered us. So we want to know if it's real or not. So just drink water, move it through, then see if you want that little piece of chocolate.
that's great. Okay, so we've spoken about individuals, myself being one of them, who eats far too fast, and we've spoken about how we should slow down on eating to improve digestion. And number two, creating space between those negative foods, quote unquote negative. Um, what are some other areas? And I guess if you were to give, if you're able to, and no stress if it's not something you can do right now, but if there is more steps involved in this process for someone who's listening right now that they can take to improve their health, what might they be? So we have again slowing down your eating, creating space between you and the quote unquote bad food. What would be number three, four, and five if there is one?
So number three is water. So drinking to activate organ
How much
systems. So
water
the
each
amount of
day?
water that we do need is 3 liters a day, but drunk incredibly slow. So you're not throwing it down and you're not losing it through urination. So it's very, very slow. And the only reason why it needs to be 3, that's how much is needed to activate the liver. So if you're drinking a 3, you will have water in the bowel to cause contraction. Now, when there's good contraction and we're having complete bowel eliminations, then the liver is activating. It's releasing fats and toxins. So I would say number 3 is water. Number 4 would be go for a walk. Like, you really need that fresh air. You really need that headspace. So during lunch, you might want to just go for a walk. Before you have your lunch or straight after your lunch, just grab something that's healthy, that won't take long to eat, and go for a walk. By the time you come back to work, you're already refreshed. Yeah. Number 5 would be sleep is crucial. So you've really got to get that 8 hours sleep. Do not watch TV. Just go and get a book at the end of if you're feeling that you just want to rest and zonk out, then you can put something on the TV, but you're just going to fall asleep in front of the TV. But do it early. Do it early. Don't leave it too late. Don't go to bed at 10, 10:30. 10 o'clock may be the latest. But you really want to be up early to have that you time. Remember, breakfast needs to be between 7 7 o'clock you're having breakfast would be awesome. So the bell actually moves between 4 and 5.
And so for specific emotions,
Yeah.
let's go.
So 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock's fine. Yeah.
So for specific emotions, let's maybe go through stress to begin with, and we can move to anxiety. Is there specific foods that we can say we're someone that is always stressed, and obviously we don't want to eat when we're stressed, we want to chew slowly and things like that. But is there specific foods that we can have that can support stress or rather help us to regulate?
Yeah. So if someone is bored, and is stressed, then you can have things that you start to use your hands. When people are bored, like you could sit and have some pumpkin seeds, but with the shell in it. So you're actually doing something, and they're the visual people that need that interaction with their hands, eating, so forth. Um, Frequent eating is actually good for stress. So it could be things like celery sticks, carrot sticks. I know it sounds boring, but things again that you can just nibble on. Um, and almonds, nuts are good, but just stay away from the moldy nuts like peanuts and cashews. But greens, definitely. Greens lower stress levels. Remember, it's all about lowering inflammation. If you have inflammatory foods, your stress will increase and your anxiety will go through the roof. So it's all about having foods that are easy to break down to relieve stress. But then again, water again will alleviate stress. Juices like beetroot is a great de-stressor because it's high in vitamin B. So you could have beetroots, you can put that into a juice, into a salad. Yep, spinach, carrot. So these are the de-stressors. You can have super green powders if you don't have time to cook. So you could just put a couple of tablespoons of super greens into some water, a shaker, sip on that, and your stress decreases.
Incredible. And what about similar foods for arousing states like anxiety, or would it be different foods?
Same,
Great, okay.
same foods.
And
Yeah,
okay, so
same food. Because with anxiety, it's even higher inflammation in the body, in the gut. There's an increase.
what common myths about diets and moods do you feel need to be debunked? Like, what have you heard on social media?
Oh,
Let's run through some.
okay. Dark chocolate would be one of them.
Tell us about it.
Dark chocolate, definitely not good. Because it can't break down. It's sugar and fat. So the liver's going to go, oh, not this again. So it's good marketing, I guess. It's colourful, so people do get drawn to it, but it will have the same response. The other one would be caffeine. Caffeine causes a lot of inflammation. So, if you have people drinking 2 or 3 coffees a day, that's suicide. That's going to give them so much inflammation, dehydration. Also, they're losing minerals like iron, potassium, calcium, magnesium just from coffee. So, if they have that first thing in the morning, that's killing all their good bacteria first thing in the morning. And they're setting themselves up for anxiety all through the day. So then you have that catch 22, then they get tired, so then they have another coffee. So coffee is a major myth. It does not increase energy, it lowers your energy. Yeah. Um, Anything else? I don't know. I'm sort of like around health all the time. Luke, what have you heard? That's
Yeah, I mean,
that you think would be a myth. Oh, kombucha. What about
tell us
kombucha?
about it.
It's a mushroom that's fermented. Now, that was a craze that was set up years ago, like about 25 years ago, maybe more. And it was a mushroom with a load of sugar in it, fermenting. So then you didn't hear of it for years. And then someone came up with, putting it into a bottle, rebranded, and it looked pretty, and people were doing it. So you've got a fermented product that's sugary put into an environment that's already fermented with bad bacteria. What do you think is going to happen? It's just encouraging more bad bacteria. You can get away with actually having um, you can get away with having fermented, say, beetroot or carrot if it's an alkaline environment. You can get, some good bacteria being created. Yeah.
So, what about other fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and things like that?
So the funny thing with sauerkraut, no one can digest cabbage. That's hilarious. And if you are going to have it, cook it. Really cook cabbage if you want to be able to break it down. So it's quite interesting, the sauerkraut, but that's definitely in there. No one can break it down. So I would say maybe cook it, then try fermenting it. I don't know. But go for the beetroot and the carrot fermented vegetable.
Fascinating. Okay, so we have those key points there. Is there any more that you would like to add to that alongside of chewing properly, drinking water, and various things like that?
I think we've covered it. You need to have, if life is too difficult, to start with creating a good diet because of your lifestyle, and I would say go on to having a product that can do it for you. So you can have it 3 times a day. You don't have to think. It will do the job for you. So through COVID, we did formulate a product, and it's quite good for getting down the inflammation, killing off the candida, feeding the body with a prebiotic, and also sealing the gut wall. So you can do that. It's very quick, it's effective, and it will help people get onto a good diet because they're already producing good bacteria, good microbiome, they're happier, and their gut functions a lot better. So they'll make some good decisions once getting out there
And
to shop.
and for those who are looking for maybe some courses or to get in contact with you, where should they go to?
Sure. We have just my email. We've got a website, Reset the Gut, but my email is simply paredesanna222@gmail.
Great, awesome. And anyone who wants that email address is going to be down below, and also include your site as well. It's Reset the Gut, and then also you have your clinics there as well. So thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Luke. Enjoy.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Getting Mental podcast. If you like this episode, then you'll love this one here and this one here. Check them out.